Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. And we are here together for FM InFocus webinar. That is the support we are going to provide you for June 2024 exam preparations. Welcome for this webinar, and I am Richa, and I work as Education Support Manager at ACCA. So, as the title suggests, we will be giving you insights on how to manage your time and master your technique. So our session today is designed to support you with financial management paper, where expert tutor Jo Tuffill will share her insights to help you prepare for June exams. So this webinar will focus on how to deal with objective questions, constructive response questions, and the lessons on time management, importance of question practice, and best practices. That's the most important thing. Best practices during the final 3 weeks before your exam. So towards the end, we will be picking the questions which you have already submitted in advance to us. And if the time permits, we will also be taking up a few live questions as well. So before I hand over to Jo, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. You will find a help icon on your screen that will provide resources to help you with the technical thing during the webinar. There are icons for slides and media player, so that you will need to see that both of them are there, as you will need them in the session. There is an attendee chat function to help you engage with fellow webinar attendees, but please do not share your personal details there. And then there is a resource list. So that contains all the important links related to financial management paper. So you can arrange your screen to suit you and resize the windows if you need to. And if at any point you cannot hear what we are saying, or you are not able to see any visual, please don't worry. Just refresh the browser. You will be getting an email tomorrow with the details how you can listen again to this webinar. So don't worry, you will have an access to the recording as well. I am going to hand over to Jo in a moment, and we'll be back with you at the end of the session. In the meantime, if you want to ask ACCA or Jo questions related to financial management paper, please feel free to do so using Q&A button. So, but please note, we cannot guarantee answering everyone or each of the questions, but we hope whatever we are able to share will be helpful to all of you. So handing over to you, Jo.
Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Jo Tuffill and I'm a management accounting expert tutor for the ACCA. I've taught on ACCA courses for over 20 years now, and I'm passionate about supporting students. Hence, I love doing these webinars each quarter. I'm hoping you're going to get a lot out of today. And so please do ask those questions if you're burning to ask us a question, and hopefully we can get to some of them at the end of this time. So what we are going to cover today is how to answer constructed response questions, what goes wrong when time management goes wrong, what to do, the importance of your question practice on that practice platform, and then some best practices during the final 3 weeks, and then the live Q&A. So first of all, how to answer constructed response questions. First of all, I'm going to look at the written questions. You need to understand those verbs and the responses. You do not use bullet points. You must absolutely use full sentences. You will not gain any marks for bullet points, even if they're correct, because they're not explained. So you need to look at the verb being used in the requirement. You need to identify, describe, or comment, then a short sentence will suffice, not a bullet point, a short sentence. If it says explain, discuss, or critically discuss, then more detail will be required. So obviously, potentially 2 sentences. So you need to state the point, explain the point, and then illustrate the point using the scenario or using your own example. So let's look at full sentences and why. So here it says, using your results for the settlement discount and bulk purchase discount, comment on the financial acceptability to Candy Company of each option. So there's 1 mark for commenting on the settlement discount and 1 mark for commenting on the bulk purchase discount. So if you're a student that simply says reject the settlement discount, this will score no marks. As I say, that is a bullet point. That is not a sentence explaining. So it's important to be able to explain, discuss, and understand what the calculations show. Candidates cannot just accept or reject, they must justify the bulk purchase and early settlement discount based on their calculations. So here, the early settlement discount option has a net cost to Candy Company, so should be rejected. Can you see that is a full sentence and it's explaining it, so therefore you would get 1 mark. Hopefully you can see the difference between the first bit with no marks and the second one which gets a full mark. It just takes a little bit extra effort and you will make sure you get those marks that you deserve, because you knew the examples here now for you. This one says, discuss why discounted cash flows, investment appraisal methods are considered to be superior to non-discounted cash flow methods, 6 marks. So it says discuss. So you're going to get 2 marks for each item that you state and discuss. So you must make sure that you write in full sentences. So first of all, DCF methods are superior. That is your statement. But you've got a because DCF methods take account of time value of money. So there is your first mark, because you've done the point of superiority, which is your statement, and you've identified it, but you haven't actually developed it yet into that second mark. So there is your statement and your why in a full sentence, and it's not a bullet point. Now you're going to get a second mark for saying the superiority and the identification has been developed into discussion as to why. So here, DCF methods discount future cash flows to their present values, thereby giving more weight to cash flows in the future. For example, years 1 and 2 compared to years 5 and 6. So you've developed your point, and therefore you're going to get 2 marks. This is another way of getting 2 marks, which is what I was saying by using an example. So here the point of superiority has been identified and a comparison with a non-DCF technique has been discussed. So here DCF methods discount future cash flows to their present values, whereas non-DCF methods such as payback ignore the timing of the cash flows. So therefore you'd get 2 marks for either of those responses. Hopefully it's clear to you now that it's not about bullet points and statements. It's about explaining why and discussing, expanding your points. So let's have a look at this one. This one is the second part. So DCF methods are superior to non-DCF methods because DCF methods use cash flows, whereas non-DCF methods do not. Well, here there's an issue, because that would get 0 marks. And you're thinking to yourself, why? Well, the point is not wholly correct. The payback method is a non-DCF method technique, but still uses cash flows. What you do have to do is correctly make a statement. So here, DCF methods use cash flows, whereas non-DCF method like ROCE does not. So that would get 1 mark because you specifically identified the correct statement that ROCE doesn't use cash flows, whereas payback may. So ROCE uses an average accounting profits, which can result in a different outcome to cash flows. Profits can be distorted by accounting policies, such as depreciation. So here, that would get 2 marks. Now, the point is the first mark is easiest to get. Hopefully you can all see that. The first mark is easiest to get, making the statement and saying why. The second mark is developing. So that's going to be the harder mark to get. We need to ensure that we get those first easy marks. And then we can then work on getting those slightly harder marks if we have time. So it's really, really important to not throw away your first easy mark because you haven't written it properly. Right, let's now come to the spreadsheet. So there's no need to use a specific format. There are recommended formats. but I would recommend you learning a format for each type of Section C question that you can get, where you get a calculation. Those formats will really, really help you in quickly and effectively laying out your question so that you can get the marks clearly. You need to label workings and use headings. Markers can see the formulas in the cell. You do not need to write out formulas. We can look in the cell and see your workings, and that's where you should be doing your formulas. You need to make sure you expand your columns and format your numbers so it's easy to mark. And you must also practice using copy and paste within the spreadsheet, because this will make you much quicker. You need to highlight those answers and label them clearly for the examining team, and really must use practicing using functions like the IRR and the net present value within the spreadsheet. It's so much quicker. And if you don't practice them, you could get them wrong because they're slightly different. So I now have a video for you to look through of me doing a question for you on the practice platform. Please look in your media player now. So here I am on the practice platform, and I'm looking at the first of the September-December 2023 past exam questions, and it's called Polborough Company. I've skipped part A and moved on to the net present value calculation, along with the two calculations required for sensitivity analysis. So there's a relatively simple net present value calculation required here. It says calculate the nominal net present value of the investment project and comment on its financial acceptability. Well, that is for 5 marks. Now, the examining team said this should have been a routine net present value computation for well-prepared candidates, and actually many did get fully correct answers. However, a number of errors were made in the following areas for some candidates: omitting fixed costs when they said they were incremental and therefore relevant, inflating those fixed costs incorrectly, not placing the tax liability in the correct time period, 1 year in arrears, and not actually justifying the financial acceptability comment. This meant that these relatively straightforward marks in a well-practiced area of the syllabus were lost, unfortunately, for some candidates. Now I want to give you a few pointers to help you format your answers so it's easy for the examining team to mark them. As you can see here, the net present value calculation looks muddled. You need to ensure that you expand those columns so that we can see those numbers, like so. You also need to make sure that you highlight your answer. So format that number and then highlight the answer so it's again clear to the examining team. Make sure you have your workings shown inside the cells. So here I have the volume times by the 200 contribution. So I can see that that calculation is correct. And then when I'm inflating those fixed costs, I'm showing clearly the inflation rate of 6% for year 2, a further 4% for year 3, and then a further 3% for year 4. I've clearly identified that I'm doing an extra year for tax to the examining team because it's 1 year in arrears, and I'm showing my fixed costs as costs by showing them as a negative. Again, therefore, my tax is also shown as a negative. And it may be an idea to put that as a highlight to show that you've got a total for your cash flows. I've used the net present value function rather than using the discount tables, and I'm clearly using the 11% in that. Then I'm taking off the investment to get back to my net present value calculation. So all the workings are in the cells. I've highlighted the relevant parts, and the examining team will find it very straightforward to mark those answers. Now, for the 1 mark on the financial justification, it is acceptable to say the net present value is positive, therefore the investment is financially acceptable. It's not acceptable to say financially acceptable. You have to justify it by referring to the decision rule that the net present value is positive. Now, when it comes to part 2 and 3, do not repeat all those calculations. Simply copy and paste from above. So I'll show you how to do that. We want sensitivity to the level of contribution per unit. Therefore, we need to take contribution and we need to take tax to find the cash flows that are affected by contribution per unit. Contribution's already been calculated, so we reference up the cash flows that we need by copying and paste all the way over. You could copy those years if you want to, but not necessary. And then we need to take our tax flows. And remember, it's 1 year in arrears, so we simply times that now by minus 0.25. Copy that across. And now we have our cash flows to calculate our present value of the cash flow under consideration. Simply add one to the other, copy across. So in order to find the present value of those cash flows, we're going to use the net present value function again. So equals net present value function 0.11, which is the discount rate, and we highlight the cash flows from year 1 onwards. Remember, the net present value function finds the present value of cash flows from year 1 onwards. We now are able to calculate sensitivity by taking the net present value from above and divided by the present value of the cash flow under consideration. Make it a percentage to 2 decimal places and highlight your answer. So now we come to the third part, which is sensitivity to the discount rate. This requires us to find the IRR, because the IRR is when the net present value is 0. So we again lay out our cash flows and use the IRR function, because this is the quickest and simplest way to do it. You don't need to use linear interpolation, it takes longer if you're using the spreadsheet function. So we reference up our cash flows from previously, do not repeat. We need to now pop in the investment in time 0. And then we can now use the IRR function, which equals IRR, highlights all the cash flows, comma, and then make a guess. And so I'm going to guess 0.2, which is 20%. That gives us the IRR. Put it as a percentage to 2 decimal places. Now we have to calculate the sensitivity. The sensitivity is going to be the change between the current rate of 11% that we're using and the IRR. So therefore, the sensitivity is going to be 18% minus 11% over the original 11%. which gives us a percentage of 67.28%. Highlight your answer. So there we have it. I've shown you a quick way of completing this part B of the question, using referencing, copy and paste, highlighting, formatting, and working within the cells. Do not write out formulas. I hope you found this useful. So that's me showing you how to do a constructed response question, and hopefully that will help you in your exam prep now. Now I want to go on to when time management goes wrong. What to do? Well, basically, I'm assuming that you're at the end of your exam when your time management goes wrong. And so if you're choosing to do section B as your last section, then imagine you've got, I don't know, 20 minutes left and you should be allowing 50 minutes for section B, what you should be doing is looking at the 3 cases and then picking the topics that are your best. Picking the topics that you're best. And so there's obviously 30 marks going. So you need to try and get at least, 16 marks in that 20 minutes. So by picking the topic that you're best at, you're more likely to achieve that. You need to think about whether the calculations are going to take time versus the discursive questions. And often the discursive questions are much quicker to do than the calculation questions. But that does depend on whether you actually know the answers. You could also look at difficulty of questions. I like to traffic light my cases. There's often 2 easy questions, which I'd say are green, 1 amber question, which is the medium question, and then 2 much harder questions. So we're looking to try and get those 2 easy questions, definitely. So what we don't want to do is rush them and not get the right answer. So let me have a look at this for you. Let's look at this section B case study. This is Fuchsia Company. It's an example of a case question in syllabus area F, which was business valuations. Now what we have 5 questions. The first 3 questions are calculation, and the last 2 are discursive. So those last 2 questions are going to be much quicker to do if you're running out of time. So you probably need to think about bypassing the first 3 and then looking at the final 2. Getting those 2 done and guessing if there's an issue if you don't know the answer. You can then go back to the previous calculation questions and seeing which ones are going to be quick and effective and you know easily. So that is an approach which you can take. Often these case study questions have a mix of calculations and discursive. And it's often 3 and 2 or 2 and 3. It's definitely not all calculation and definitely not all discursive. The other thing you can do is traffic light it. So, for instance, those first 2 calculation questions are well-tested parts of the syllabus. You should have plenty of MCQs on practicing how to do a price-earnings ratio method and a dividend valuation method. The amber question is again a well-tested part of the syllabus, but students do get themselves mixed up between weak, semi-strong and strong, and so it's really important to practice those in this area. My 2 red questions, which were probably the ones which I wouldn't have done until last or perhaps guessed, number 5, is what is the market value of loan notes? And there is a topic explainer on that in the student resources section of the ACCA website, which is done by me. And then number 5 is there is a behavioural finance technical article and podcast. But the point I was trying to make is that you can either look at these as calculation questions that you do second and make sure you get the discursive ones first, or you can look at these as easy, mediocre and hard. And you can focus on those easy marks in the limited time you've got. Now, if you've decided to do section C last, what happens when time management goes wrong? So you've got through section A and section B, and suddenly you've realised that you haven't left the 80 minutes that you required for section C. You may have, 50 minutes to do 2 questions. So what I would do is, again, I would focus on the written sections. It's much quicker to gain the marks in those written sections than it is to do the calculations. You'll find often students will spend a long time on calculations, thinking about them, formatting, etc. And if your time management's gone wrong, you could get your marks better or quicker by going for the written sections first. But what you mustn't do is rush. You must never use bullet points. And then once you've completed those written sections, then obviously go and have a go at the calculations. Now you will be short of time, but you can't assume issues away. I'm going to show you what I mean by both those points now. So here is a typical question asked by the examining team. Critically discuss So critically discuss means explain using pros and cons. With reference to relevant theory, so you need to identify that relevant theory, the view of Director A and Director B. So this is a scenario-based question. So if we go to the scenario, Director A has a view which is consistent with Modigliano and Miller with tax. So that's the relevant theory to state. Director B has a view which is consistent with the traditional theory of capital structures. So those are the reference to the relevant theories. So those are going to get marks. 1 mark for the correctly identifying the relevant theory for capital structures for Director A and Director B. Now the critically discuss happens, and those are where the other marks come. So if I do a schedule of the marks, you need to, if the time management goes wrong, focus on the basics. We need to get 4 out of the 6 marks. So with the 6 points to make for 6 marks, you need the easy marks from the 2 directors. So if I make the marks like this, correctly linking to the theory, 1 mark, 1 pro, which is 1 mark, and 1 con, which is 1 mark. 1 and 2 are the easier marks to get. You don't need 3. And I'll show you why. So what I do on the word processor in the practice platform, I'd have 2 sections, one for Director A at the top and Director B at the bottom. And I would complete the first 2 points in each of those sections, leaving space between Director A and Director B. And therefore, directly linking it to the optimum theory for Modigliano and Miller, and then the traditional theory for Director B, we get 1 mark each. And remember, it's got to be a full sentence, okay? So you do need to write it in a professional way to get that mark. And then the next 2 marks come from linking it to a pro. So why is the view correct? And those are slightly easier marks to get than the 2 marks that we don't want, because we haven't got time to get them and we may not get them anyway. So we're now going to move on because we've got 4 out of the 6 marks correctly stated and explained in a full sentence. So that's how you need to approach if you're running out of time. Focus on the easier marks. Don't start with Director A and make 3 points. Do Director A and B at the same time, making the first point clearly and then the second point. And then you don't need to worry about the 3rd point for each of those because you've got 4 out of 6. And you can move on to the easier marks in the next section. Harder marks are just that. They're hard to get, and you may not get them anyway if you spend time on them. What do we do with calculations? Well, this is a typical format for the weighted average cost of capital. So what you need to do is really use formats. It's really, really important. If you've got a format for your weighted average cost of capital, make sure you've learnt it and write it down, and then you fill in the numbers. So the way I do this weighted average cost of capital is I lay out the sources of finance down the left, and then I put 3 columns in. 1 for the market values, 1 for the cost of capitals, and then the final column times is the market value by the cost of capital to get a dollar cost. I then total the dollar cost column and I total the market value column, and that WACC calculation is the cost over the market value totals and gives you a weighted average cost of capital. Now, what I can then do is show that I can pull together a weighted average cost of capital if I'm running out of time. So for instance, I can now assume those percentages away. Those cost of capital calculations take time, and I may be running out of time, and I may actually get them wrong anyway. All you have to do is make an appropriate assumption. And if that appropriate assumption obviously is wrong, that will become an own figure rule mark flowing through to that WACC calculation. So for instance, you could be getting half a mark each for those market values. And you could be getting, 2 marks for the ordinary shares cost of capital, 1 mark for the preference shares, and maybe 2 marks for the loan notes. have a go at those easy percentages, but if there's one that's just going to take too long, make sure you get those 2 marks for the own figure rule marks for the WACC calculation, pulling it together. It's so important that you don't waste your time on marks that you might not be able to get anyway correct. But do show that you know how to get the final answer with assumptions and therefore get own figure rule marks. So that's if you're running out of time. Now the importance of question practice. So I have a poll for you. Do you practice questions on the practice platform? Can you please start answering my poll? Okay, so we have quite a few of you have actually now completed the poll. I just wanted to give you a bit of time to make sure I got all of you participating. So that's great to see. We've got 54.6% practicing questions on the platform. That's sad to see that 16% of you say no. And then sometimes, well, that's hopeful. Well, it's so important to practice questions on the platform. You need to practice on that platform where you're going to take your exam. If you don't practice on the platform, it's a bit like doing a driving test without practicing the car that you're going to take your test in. So it really does make a difference to whether you pass or fail this exam. So I'm going to show you why practicing on the platform is really important by giving you a short walkthrough of Candy Company Part A1, because this is where you're going to practice your technique to get quick, efficiently through a question. Please go to your media player. So here I am on the practice platform, and I'm looking at the September-December 2021 past exam paper. This is one of the section C questions, and this question is on the working capital area of the syllabus. So this question, Candy Company, has 5 requirements in 3 parts, and the first 3 requirements are using this spreadsheet. So it says calculate the financial effect on the bulk purchase discount, the financial effect on offering the early settlement discount, and then comment on the financial acceptability. Now this is all to be done in this one spreadsheet. So I have completed part 1 for you, the bulk purchase discount, and I'm showing you here some top tips for how to complete this effectively and quickly. Now the bulk purchase discount asks us to compare the current policy with the future policy. It will involve the same calculations therefore. So you need to lay it out so that you can quickly copy the same calculations that you're doing for the current policy into the new policy, but just change the variables. There is no need to write out the formulas that you're calculating for the purchase cost, the order cost, and the holding costs. I can see those by interrogating the cells. So it would completely waste time if you were to type out order costs, for instance, the cost per order times by the demand divided by the order quantity. I can see that by clicking on that cell as a marker, which I'll do now. I've not wasted time writing that out because it's in the cell. I've done the same for the holding cost. So the holding cost here is 9% of the purchase price times by the average inventory. I have not written that out. That will take time. You need to be able to show this effectively and quickly by using labeling and then using the formula functionality within the cells. What I was then able to do is then copy this across by using copy and paste. And then all I had to then do is change those parameters. So for the new policy, I obviously need to type in new, and then I needed to change the purchase price because the purchase price is going to be cheaper because we're going to be getting a discount. So the discount is 1.5%. So I'm just going to go equals 30 times by 0.985. Therefore, it's now 98.5% of the cost. As you can see, that automatically then changed the holding cost, and it automatically then changed the purchase cost. Again, I need to change that to say new, so I'm just going to reference it. I then need to change the quantity to be the 1500, and again, it will automatically change everything that's affected in there, which it has done. I then need to just check any other parameters are changing. And if you check the question, the order cost is going to go up by 25. So that needs to go up to 100. And the holding cost is now going to be 10% of the purchase price. So I need to change that to be 0.1. And there you have it. That was so much quicker than retyping the formulas. Also, I'd like you to highlight key figures so the marker is clear on the calculations you've made. And again, clearly labelled the total cost of the current policy, the total cost of the new policy. And then reread the question to check you've answered it correctly. It says calculate the financial effect of accepting the bulk purchase discount. So therefore the financial effect needs to be pulled out and that needs to be highlighted too. And it's a saving because the current cost is higher than the new cost. So hopefully you can see by clearly labelling the cells, you do not need to write out formulas, but you do need to make sure that you're using the spreadsheet effectively and making sure that you're referencing cells so that the marker can see where your figures have come from. This is so important because of those own figure rule marks. Any mistakes can then be followed through by using the formulas in the cells, and therefore you only get penalised at the first mistake. Remember, practice makes perfect, so you must practice using this spreadsheet. Well, hopefully you've now all realised why you should be using the practice platform, because that means that you're more likely to get through a question in a more timely manner and get those marks that you deserve. You also should be looking at the practice platform to practice those MCQs. And what you should be doing when you're using the practice platform is looking for the distractors. Because if you understand why the distractors that are there and build them into the review of your question practice, then you're more likely to spot it as a distractor and know that that isn't quite the answer that you should have been getting. So you do not rush through those MCQs. Do not rush through them. You must also reread the question before you select the answers. So being on the platform will help you practice this. So I've got some examples for what I mean. So the first example is rereading the question. What is the theoretical value of a right per existing share? You may have thought they were just asking for the theoretical value of a right, which would be the TERP minus the rights price. But per existing share requires you to times it by the rights fraction. The other issue is to 2 decimal places. Now it won't allow you to put a calculation in without 2 decimal places, but you need to obviously make sure you do the rounding up or down correctly. So 0.5 and above goes up, and anything below 0.5 has to go down. And so therefore the requirement is really, really important. So make sure you reread that question before you put your answer in. The other one here is about which two of the followings are descriptions of basis risk. You must answer two. If you answer one, you get the whole question wrong, even if it is correct. So again, the importance of reading the question before you move on to the next answer. The software will allow you just to click on one. So you really must make sure that you do find two, because otherwise you'll get 0, even if that answer is right. Here is the importance of understanding why the distractors are there. The examining team spend a lot of time coming up with those distractors because that's what their aim is, to distract you, so that you think you've got the right answer when you haven't, because they want you to be technically competent, not just be able to guess. So here, this is in relation to finished goods inventory, assuming a 360-day year, how much finance will be needed from the overdraft? Well, they've given us some sales at the top and a profit margin. And it says that finished goods inventory days vary throughout the year. So we've got a minimum and a maximum. Now it says that Craig Company intends to finance permanent current assets with equity, so that's long-term finance, and fluctuating current assets with its overdraft. So the question means I need to know what the fluctuating current assets are, because that is what the overdraft finance will be required. And so as we've just got inventory here, they're looking for the fluctuating cost of inventory. And so the minimum would be the permanent inventory, and the maximum will be the permanent plus the fluctuating. And what you need to be able to do is to convert that learned formula for inventory days. You need to rearrange it so you can find the inventory cost from those days. So here are all the answers scheduled out for you to show you why the distractors work. So the correct answer would be the difference between the maximum and the minimum being the fluctuating, which is 30 days, using the cost of sales and not the sales. The other distractors are all there. So if you've made the mistake of using the maximum, you'd have got the 40. The minimum, you'd have got the 30. And if you'd made the mistake of using sales and not cost of sales, you'd have got the 17. So hopefully you can see by practicing on the platform, falling for distractors and understanding why you fell for them means that next time you'll get the right answer. Now we come on to best practices during the final 3 weeks before the exams. What I would do is traffic light your syllabus. You know what you're good at. You know what you're consistently getting right or wrong. So make sure you traffic light the syllabus. Put in your red topics, your amber topics, and your green topics. And you need to focus a lot on those red topics because you can bet that it will come up. The other thing you need to focus on is there's 3 main topics that come up in section C. And those are 40 marks of your paper. So you must be going onto the practice platform and having a go at those past papers, which will all be in those sections of the syllabus. Again, focus on one of those sections which is not your best topic, because again, if your best topic comes up, that's happy days. But if you've practiced your worst topic, for instance, I bet everybody finds identifying and evaluating alternative sources of business finance hard. You must practice those debt versus equity questions, as well as the weighted average cost of capital questions. The other part that students seem to find difficult is the section B. Now, you will get 2 questions out of the 3 from those 2 syllabus areas. So you must practice them, otherwise you're throwing away 20 marks. Those 2 syllabus areas are only tested in the MCQ areas, and therefore you will get a section B case study on business and asset valuations and a section B case study on risk management. So if if you're wanting to run the gauntlet, then by all means do not look too hard at them, but I would definitely be looking at those because that's 20 marks. And there's lots of practice that you can get in those areas on the study hub. What I would also do is learn theory and techniques, not answers. So we've talked about remembering to look at formulas and process, doing formats, e.g. for the WACC calculation. But you must be able to explain concepts. You must be able to look at pros and cons, and you must be able to do definitions. So what I want you to do is learn the theory. Do not go to questions and learn the answers, because the question will be different and you need to apply the theory to the question asked. So this takes practice. So look at this. This is similar but not the same. These 3 questions are all from the theory to do with creating a specific cost of capital for investment appraisal decisions. The first question says, when can you use the current WACC of the company in investment appraisal, and then indicate how its limitations can be overcome? Well, that's where basically business risk, financial risk, and the project is small. So business risk is the same, finance risk is the same, and the project is small compared to the company. It can be overcome by creating a specific cost of capital using the risk of the area of the business that you're moving into. Now, that number 2 is a similar question. It says discuss how the capital asset pricing model can be used to calculate a project-specific cost of capital. You'll be using the same theory. Business risk is changing. Finance risk might be changing. And so it's using the same theory, but a different question has been asked. And finally, discuss how risk-adjusted discount rate can improve investment decisions is again explaining how to create a risk-adjusted discount rate and why you would do it. But then you need to go further and say it's going to improve investment decisions because we get the correct rate for appraising projects. And if we have the incorrect rate, then we could accept a project that we shouldn't be accepting. So the theory is using the capital asset pricing model to create a specific cost of capital, but they're 3 different questions. So you can't learn answers, you learn theory, and you need to apply it to the question asked. That's what you should be practicing in the past 3 weeks. You should absolutely be doing timed questions and sections. So section A and B, I recommend you spend 50 minutes on each. So section A has 15 marks, so you should be working to 50 minutes. Sorry, 15 questions, 30 marks, and you should be working to 15 minutes. You should be flagging those questions to get the easy marks, coming back to the harder ones at the end of your time. You should be doing section B, splitting the 50 minutes into 3 sections, and again, focusing on the easy marks within those sections, ignoring the harder marks. Do not spend time on a long calculation when you could easily get to another case study and pick up some quicker and easier marks. You can always come back to it. Timed in section C, you must be sticking to 40 minutes for those 2 questions. So set yourself a timer and stop. Then evaluate how well you've done, and could you have got easier marks by doing the written sections rather than the calculations first? Really be hard on yourself. Have you written in full sentences? And can you easily and clearly see your answer and follow it through if you've made a mistake, if you were marking it? Perhaps send some questions or your spreadsheet that you're using to a friend to see if they could mark it the same way. So timed questions and sections are really important to get your time management in check, and do not go over time in your sections. Be really strict on yourself. Finally, you really must be doing a mock. It's a learning exercise. It's not the final exam. So you get to practice on the platform. You get to practice your game plan, which sections you're going to do first, which section you're going to do last. You're going to look at your time management. Remember 50-50, 40-40. And you're going to practice your nerves. Put yourself in a room, lock yourself away, give yourself the 3 hours and practice those nerves and that time management. and you'll be 12 to 14% more likely to pass because you've felt the feeling before you get into the exam room. So I've got another poll for you. The pre-June 24 mock and debriefs release dates. Do we all know them? Can you have a go at which one you think that is? Hopefully you've seen the communications. Are we going to get any responses? Oh, we're getting some. Right, I'm going to close the poll because I want to allow time for questions. Okay, so the actual dates are 13th of May and 17th of May. So that's good. Nearly half were getting up to that. So yes, the mocks are now out on the platform and the debriefs will be out tomorrow. So make sure you do the mock first, sign it to yourself, do the mock 2 times in 3 hours, and then you can exit the exam and then go under the mark tab. And obviously the MCQ areas for section A and B will automatically be marked for you, and you can review the answers in the sample. And then for section C, you can use the debriefs on the platform or the sample answers to mark them yourself. And then you can see, once you've assigned that and done that, you can then see your results to review it afterwards. Right, so we're now on to Q&A. So I had some pre-submitted questions, which I've just picked 5 from. So thank you for submitting those. So it says, which section should I do first in order? Well, my recommendation is I would do section A first, then C, and then B. Section B is the hardest part of the paper. Students tend to find this quite challenging. So it's good to get your section A done first, calmly and effectively, making sure that you stick to those 50 minutes. Then go on to your section C questions. Again, stick to time, 40 minutes and 40 minutes. That will leave plenty of time, which is 50 minutes for section B. If you then find section B hard and you're finding that you short on time there, i.e. you've got some spare time, you can always go back to some of your section C and fill in any gaps that you feel that you've left out. How can I tackle the questions for part A sections? I've kind of covered this already, but you have got 15 questions and there will be easy ones, mediocre ones and hard ones. What you need to do is scoop up all those easy and mediocre marks first. So I would be flagging any questions which you're finding hard or you think are going to take a lot of time. Go through scooping up the easy marks and the quick marks, but don't overrush them because obviously we can fall for distractors. And then say you've got 40 minutes and you've done most of it, you can then go back to those harder questions in the final 10 minutes and fight for them. But once you got to those 50 minutes, if you still can't do those harder questions, just go, I don't need them. They're hard questions. I only need the easy questions to pass this paper. So don't worry about them and move on to the other sections of the paper. Do not spend time working on questions which are too hard. Then it says, how do I get access to multiple choice past questions? Well, you're right, there's not a lot of questions on the practice platform. They're only in the specimen exam, the 2 practice exams, and now this pre-mock. But what you can do is go onto the study hub. There's plenty of multiple choice questions there based on past questions, but also a rich source of multiple choice questions are the examining team's articles. The examiner's articles based on the past exams. So the review of the past exams always has some past multiple choice questions in there that students found difficult. And those examiners' articles go all the way back to 2020. So on the study hub, and sorry, they're on the ACCA website, the student resources. So I think there's 4 Section A questions which are released, and then there's 1 full case study question released each time there's an examiner's article. So there are some extra questions which you should be able to find easily and have a go at. This is my 4th attempt at FM. Any specific tips or guidance? Well, if it's your 4th attempt, then you must have a pretty good history of what your results are. So your results are in the 40s, so something like 43 and above, then your results are down to exam technique. So you now need to get on the practice platform and doing timed questions, sorting out your exam technique. It shouldn't be knowledge if you're getting over 43. But if you're getting below 43, then you really are looking at a knowledge issue. And you can go to My Exam Performance and have a look and see where you've got some lacking in knowledge, where you're failing your papers. So the My Exam Performance, if you goes back to September 23, if you've taken them in the past few sittings. So you can have a look and see where the syllabus areas that you're failing at. And you need to then go and have a look at those again and check your knowledge. The My Exam Performance also will indicate if your time management is wrong. And so you can also have a look whether you're not doing very well with your time management, and also it points out whether you're not doing very well in the MCQ areas, and specifically, potentially, the Section B area, which is quite difficult. So without looking at your specific My Exam Performance, I can't give you a specific guide, but I can say that it tends to be exam technique if it's 43 and above, and if it's 43 and below, then it's definitely knowledge. So you need to go and traffic light that syllabus and focus on the areas that you're lacking the knowledge. Finally, techniques for attempting discussion questions or theory questions. Well, the best thing to do for discussion and theory questions is to do mind maps. Because what we don't want to do is learn answers, because the question will be different. So mind maps are the best way of learning theory questions. So for instance, the investment appraisal area of the syllabus has 4 investment appraisal techniques that you need to know. And you need to know why net present value is superior, why the IRR is better than is a relative measure. You need to know the advantages and disadvantages of ROCE and all the others. So the best thing to do is to put that all on one piece of paper. And then when you do questions, you take that piece of paper and you use the information on there and answer the question in full sentences. And once you've practiced doing that, then you'll start remembering what's on your mind map, and you won't need that mind map anymore. So do not learn answers. Make sure you write down your theory on a mind map. So each of the sections of the syllabus, you could do that quickly for you, and then you use that as you're practicing questions. That's my top tip. So we have other questions which I'm going to look at. Risha, are you going to come back online or?
It's okay, Jo, you can have a look onto your folder and see what best can be done.
Okay. How much time have we got left? I think I've gone over time. So
Yeah, we have, and we can stretch it by 3-4 minutes if that's okay.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So I have got one question here. It says, kindly guide on how to attempt the theory questions. I think I've already answered that. Hopefully that's clear. I've got one here which says, can we use abbreviations like DCF, CF, MPV, IRR in your answer and working? So absolutely, in the calculation areas of the syllabus, please just use DCF or MPV or IRR in your spreadsheet. In the written responses, what they do tend to do is if they ask you to do net present value, they tend to put in the bracket NPV next to it. So it's absolutely fine to then use MPV on your answer. If you're at all uncertain, then make sure in your first answer or first sentence, you then define it. So say net present value and then put in brackets NPV, and then from then on, you can use NPV. So that's my top tip. I've got one here. With section A, if there's a rounding difference, does the computer marking set within a range? No, the computer marking is set based on what they've specifically asked you to do. So they will put answers up there, which will enable you to select the correct answer if you've used the technique. So if it says to 2 decimal places and you've got 4 responses, then the answer will be correctly done. And I think I know where people are saying this is when you're doing things like using the discount tables. So what you should be doing in the MCQ areas is you should be using the discount tables when you're doing calculations that require discounting. That doesn't matter in the spreadsheet areas, of course. You can just use the cell functions to create your own discount factor because obviously it's being human marked. So if you're doing, for instance, a debt valuation question, which requires you to use discount factors, please go and use the annuity factor tables and the discount present value factor tables to calculate that market value. It does sometimes say to 2 decimal places, so you must put your stuff to 2 decimal places, and if it's put it in a box, it will be there'll be no range because it can only be one answer. All right. I think I've got a similar question here. When using the spreadsheet, making use of copy and paste, is rounding an issue? Now, roundings aren't an issue in the spreadsheet because they can see your answers. So your answer will be marked based on what you're doing in the spreadsheet. How many decimal places would I need for the MCQ question? Okay, so I think I've already answered that. You don't use the annuity, you don't calculate your own formulas. You need to use the discount tables if you're discounting in the MCQ section. And then you won't get any rounding issues. How to cover risk management, please help. Okay, well, if you're finding risk management difficult, there's a wealth of technical articles for you. I've also done a topic explainer, which is also where the technical articles are. There is also the study hub, which obviously goes through in detail as a textbook, but then there are also lots of quizzes and practice questions for you to use in the study hub. So if you need to cover risk management in the same way systematically anybody would. You need to obviously cover all the syllabus. There's no shortcut. So I would obviously focus on learning the basics and then practicing in the study hub, and then going to the technical articles and my topic explainer. Will I be penalised for using the IRR and the net present value function and not the discount tables? Absolutely not. You will not be penalised. In fact, it's recommended because it's much quicker. So you obviously can't use the IRR and the NPV function in the MCQ areas. So you must use the other techniques, which is linear interpolation and discount tables for the IRR. But all the marks will be given for doing an IRR function in the spreadsheet area. I think that's it, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. I think very well covered. The questions, though we had quite a many questions coming in, but I believe quite a many of them are just the same sort of questions, same nature of questions. So well covered. Thank you so much. And I believe students have found the session quite very useful. Lots of insights, lots of takeaways for you. With this, I really need to bring things to a close. Time is running. And before I close, would just like to remind you, all of you, that in resource section, there are all important links related to technical articles, topic explainer, mocks, debriefs, and the on-demand webinars, and everything is there in your resource section. Do check that and take all those links with yourself. Those are very helpful ones. And with this, all the best for your exam preparation and or for your exams as well. Big thanks to Jo, and thank you to my team working behind to make this happen. Thank you, everyone. See you all. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.